author of Gold and the Horn. Good book, The Horn. And I was sitting around trying to think up the meaning of the lost generation, subsequent existentialism. And I said, you know, John, this is really a beat generation. And he leapt up and said, that's it, that's right.
The beat culture started with numerous small groups. It only sprouted in the 50s. Beat was a friendship, a way of living, an art, a culture, an idea, and a road. And as Kerouac would put it, beat was sympathy. In the 40s, New York native Allen Ginsberg met Franco-Canadian Jack Kerouac. Their art and literature strived to capture spontaneous moments of living. They were all about experience. Their drug and religious experimentation led their art to become their life. With their discussions of sexuality, drugs, and chaos, their lives grew to change the direction of culture forever. New York to San Francisco, Kerouac fed off characters such as Neil Cassidy, Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, William S. Burroughs, Lucien Carr, Hal Chase, and Gary Snyder. Beat was a movement being steered by Kerouac. But the second it left his control, he grew to despising and denying everything it once stood for. 1940s in New York. Old-time friends Lucien Carr, David Cameron, and William S. Burroughs were introduced to Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. Over time, Cameron developed an openly disturbing infatuation with Carr, so when Kerouac and Carr talked about shipping out from New York on a merchant vessel to live in France, the idea of Carr leaving drove Cameron mad. After years of stalking Carr, watching him sleep, and after Cameron's many failed sexual advances on Carr, Cameron became sick of rejection. He physically attacked Carr. Carr stabbed him with a Boy Scout knife and dumped his body in the Hudson River. After turning down Burroughs' advice on turning himself in, he sought out Kerouac for help. Kerouac disposed of the knife and Cameron's cigarettes. And Carr eventually turned himself in. They were all convicted. Carr with second-degree murder, which eventually turned into a conviction of first-degree manslaughter. A few years later, Carr introduced the iconic Neil Cassidy into the group. The Beat generation had started.
Post-World War II. The Central Intelligence Agency, the nuclear arms race, the fear of communists. It was a time of order, organization, and coordination. The impact of the atom bomb changed everything. The Beats needed something new to live for. Commonly referred to as bohemian hedonists, life became about moments of truly living. Consequences were made obsolete. The Beats lived off spontaneous ideas and transcendental feeling. They lived for the marginalized and the countercultures. Kerouac, with his retrospective persona, pieced the movement together with his bebop-inspired, spontaneous prose form of writing.
Gone. So, in America, when the sun goes down, and I sit on the old broken-down river pier watching the long, long skies over New Jersey, and sense all that raw land that rolls in one unbelievable huge bulge over to the west coast, and all that road going, and all the people dreaming in the immensity of it. In an hour, I know by now that children must be crying in the land where they let the children cry. And tonight the stars will be out, and don't you know that God is Pooh Bear? The evening star must be drooping and shedding her sparkler dims on the prairie, which is just before the coming of complete night that blesses the earth, darkens all the rivers, cups the peaks, and folds the final shore in. And nobody knows what's going to happen to anybody besides the forlorn rags of growing old. Think of Dean Moriarty, I even think of old Dean Moriarty, the father we never found. Think of Dean Moriarty, I think of Dean Moriarty.
In addition to the Beats, musicians started breaking boundaries. Bebop jazz went against all conventional rules of music. The fast tempo and improvised style influenced and paralleled Kerouac's writing style. Jazz became an outlet for Cassidy. Culture was being reshaped by a group of guys who simply loved to live in the moment. Improvisation influenced a subconscious mind flow. For Kerouac, it released true motion and the ability to continually express the moment. Kerouac wrote all of On the Road on telegraph paper in order to keep his train of thought, and it is even rumored that his mindset was altered by Benzodrine, which would have enhanced and multiplied his transcendental feelings and conscious.
Now it's jazz, the place is roaring, all beautiful girls in there, one mad brunette at the bar drunk with her boys. One strange chick I remember from somewhere wearing a simple skirt with pockets, her hands in there, short haircut, slouched, talking to everybody. Up and down the stairs they come, the bartenders of the regular band of Jack and the heavenly drummer who looks up in the sky with blue eyes, with a beard. He's wailing beer caps of bottles and jamming at the cash register, and everything is going to the beat. It's the beat generation, it's Bayat. It's the beat to keep, it's the beat of the heart. It's being beat and down in the world, and like old-time lowdown. And like in ancient civilizations, the slave boatmen rowing galleys to a beat, and servants spinning pottery to a beat. The faces. There's no face to compare with Jack Minger's, who's up on the bandstand now with a colored trumpeter who outblows him wild and dizzy, but Jack's face overlooking all the heads and smoke. He has a face that looks like everybody you've ever known and seen on the street in your time. Sweet face, hard to describe. Sad eyes, cruel lips, expectant gleam, swaying to the beat, tall, majestical.
What's the problem?
Well, fellas, we gotta...
I washed my hair and it shrunk.
Yeah, it's right. So, how are you?
What's the fee?
Well, I'll pay you off after.
Okay. How do you mean that?
I heard you got busted.
William S. Burroughs met Ginsberg and Kerouac in 1943 in New York. He went to Harvard for an art degree and made trips to New York where he discovered the homosexual subculture. He joined the army only to be discharged due to depression. Although he on many occasions denied being a beat writer, Burroughs had a major role in the raw art of the movement. He is best known for his novel Naked Lunch. After the movement, he spent the rest of his life addicted to morphine, selling heroin, and traveling with Ginsberg.
Allen Ginsberg met Kerouac and Burroughs through Lucien Carr. His poems were inspired by Kerouac's writing style and bebop jazz. His strong political ideas and sexual freedom are expressed in his epic poem Howl. Ginsberg questions America's freedom and could easily be called the brilliance and most committed of the beats.
Neal Cassady was the iconic beat figure. He was raised by an alcoholic father and eventually ended up in prison for stolen property. When he was introduced to Kerouac, Ginsberg, and Burroughs, he was the least educated but arguably the most interesting. Jazz was his life and his life was a blur. He was everywhere. He was the soul of Kerouac's on the road and he was just the guy Kerouac needed in his life. He laid the path for Ken Kesey, Hunter S. Thompson. They all loved him. He was magnetic and no one knew why. He spoke with madness in his voice. Experimentation, experience, life, meaning, movement. Cassady was the soul of the beats.
The Beat generation carried through the 60s and paved the way for the hippie movement. While Ginsberg followed the movement through many different phases, Kerouac did not. The Beats loved to be in control and lead the counterculture. The movement was temporary, but by the time it had grabbed the public's attention, it was practically over. On the Road did not get published for 7 years, and 10 years after it was written, Kerouac had completely changed. His fame came too late at a time where he had lost control of his life. As the hippie movement accelerated forward, Kerouac's only response was to act as a polar opposite to everything he once stood for. He fell into alcoholism and refused to see his friends. Addiction had taken over many of the original beats, and as other people picked up where they had left off, Kerouac couldn't stand it. Kerouac's beat generation ended the second he wasn't in control.